Hello, I'm Chris Moon, a fellow artist manager, and I will be your guide through tough love, adventures, and artist management. In this episode, we chat with Jordan Kurland, co-founder of Brilliant Corners Artist Management, home of Def Cab for Cutie, Best Coast, Soccer Mommy, She and Him, and many others. I've had the pleasure of meeting Jordan a few times in the past, and I was thrilled when he reached out for a chat. With this past year as a backdrop, we discussed how the pandemic has created both challenges and opportunities for artists and artist managers. Several of the Brilliant Corners artists were able to adapt to the changes in creative ways, and Jordan himself found time to reignite his passion for supporting Biden in his bid for the White House last year as well. We also touch on our love for jazz, in particular Thelonious Monk. I hope you enjoy our chat.
My name is Jordan Kurland. I am based in San Francisco and am a founding partner of Brilliant Corners Artist Management. We work with Def Cab for Cutie, the Postal Service, She and Him, Best Coast, Soccer Mommy, Toro et Moi, New Pornographers, Pup, amongst others. I'm also a partner in the Noise Pop Festival and founded the now defunct Treasure Island Music Festival, which ran from 2007 through 2018.
Cool. Well, thanks, Jordan, for reaching out and coming aboard to chat. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to mention this from the get-go and share this with you. The idea of calling this podcast Tough Love came from Darius and his old company called This Is Tough Love. I was trying to figure out, how do you encapsulate what management is from a relational perspective, because a lot of what I've been getting enjoyment out of in this period of time talking to artist managers and folks in the industry is that kind of personal drive and story. And yeah, I think that's probably just one thing that kind of sprung to mind. I always thought that was a brilliant name for a management company, and so I totally riffed it. And
yeah, that's what I was wondering. Well, I didn't know if there was a connection, but obviously when I saw the name of the podcast, that was the first thing that jumped to mind.
I couldn't, it was just too good. I think if you're trying to come up with a handful of words that explain that relationship, Tough Love's a good one. The other thing that kind of sprung to mind as I was doing some research and kind of following your career a little bit is kind of, we both started, it seems like, from a place of promoting concerts to some degree, or had that parallel with artist management. So as a place to start off, I was curious to know which came first and how did you get into both? Because, I mean, I don't know a lot of managers that at least operate and promote on the level that you guys have with Noise Pop and Treasure Island in the past.
Yeah. Well, rewinding way back to college, my first bit of work that I did around music was writing. I started reviewing records I went to a small college in Claremont, California, in Southern California, 35 miles east of LA, called Pitzer College. And we had a magazine called The Other Side, and I started reviewing records for The Other Side. And my first thought is I wanted to be a music journalist. But part of that was not having any clue about the music industry. Not to date myself, but this is early 1990s pre-internet. So you're just not getting the same level of information, and there just wasn't a consciousness about the business behind, the musicians I loved. And at least for me,
Right.
I grew up in the Midwest, had no connections to the entertainment industry. So once I started writing reviews, then I started getting contacted by college reps at record labels who wanted me to review certain records. And then a light bulb went off that, like, oh, wow, there's a business here. So I started investigating that and doing some internships. But also while I was at Pitzer, I promoted a festival there called Kuhutek, which is an annual big outdoor festival. And that was my first foray into concert promotions. When I graduated from college, I had interned at a couple record labels, Geffen and Imago, which is now defunct. Imago at that time had Henry Rollins and Amy Mann and a few other things. And I decided I wanted to work in artist management. My first experience in music, my first internship in the music industry was for a management company in New York called Seriously Inc. I was interning for two guys, Jim Grant and Roger Kramer. At the time, Living Color was their big client, but while I was there, they picked up Soul Coughing, They were working with a few other things as well. And I decided I wanted to be a manager. So this is the long version. I apologize. But
No, it's okay.
Yeah, when I graduated from Pittsburgh, I moved into LA and, I was looking for my foot in the door job. And I did, eventually landed one at ASCAP answering phones. That was the entry level. You're the receptionist, and then you become an assistant membership director, and then maybe you become a membership director, et cetera. But literally 2 weeks after I started the job, I got a call from a manager in San Francisco's office. David Lefkowitz was the manager, and his assistant at the time, Ashley Lewis, called me. I had sent my resume, and this is where it's going to get back to the promoting shows. But I had booked one of their clients for that festival, Cahootech. And after I graduated, I faxed my resume. And, as I did to many companies, saying I wanted to get into management. And they had an opening. Their big client at the time was Primus, and I was a big Primus fan back then. So, I wasn't looking to leave LA, but it seemed like a good opportunity to move to a secondary market, really get to know the secondary market, and then go back to LA or New York, where the music industry was, along with Nashville, and continues to be based. But I moved to San Francisco in 1995 for $8 an hour, answering phones, doing all these all the grunt level stuff in that office. And 1997, I picked up my first client, a band named Creeper Lagoon, who signed. Yeah, they were great. Them. They were a little bit outside of their time, a little bit between periods of indie rock popularity.
Yeah,
so
that's a good way to
put it. I'd been managing, I shouldn't say it's my first client, because I'd been managing a guy named Matt Nathanson. We went to college together, and I started managing him in college.
Oh, and, okay.
And then there was another group that was affiliated with my college. Two of the guys went there named Crumb that I brought into the company. I wasn't managing them, but I was doing day-to-day. I brought them in. They've been signed to Quest Records, Quincy Jones's imprint through Warner Brothers.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so this is you got me on the very long version of this. But long story longer, I started managing Creeper Lagoon in May of 1997. I remember this because it was right around my 25th birthday. And Sharky, who's continues to be a good friend and was a guitarist in Creeper Lagoon, his former roommate was a guy named Kevin Arnold. Kevin was the founder of Noise Pop. Kevin and I became friends through that relationship with Creeper. I offered to help him with the festival, and I've been working with him on Noise Pop since 1997. So I guess the technical answer is professionally management came first, but not putting on my promoter hat wasn't too far behind.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for getting into the nuances with all that. That's awesome. I just found, I don't know, I like the idea of understanding that relationship of promoting a show and the connection with the fans. I started out promoting shows in Nashville because there was artists I wanted to see that just weren't coming through, whether it was Elliott Smith or I promoted the first Bright Eyes show there before Connor put a record out. And I mean, it was one of those things where I was just, kind of trying to cut my teeth. I didn't know what I was doing, much like I didn't know what I was doing when I started management. But having that perspective, I thought was always really great, because it's sometimes, your relationship is so much with the artist that you manage and how they interact with the world in the industry, but not necessarily with the fans. And if you can put yourself in that promoter place of bringing artists and bringing an audience out, I think that just kind of adds a unique perspective, to how you tackle other aspects of an artist's career.
Yeah, and I think, the Noise Pop side of my career, although not lucrative at all. I haven't taken a dime from Noise Pop since 2006. So it's really, a hobby in a lot of ways, a professional hobby. But it certainly informed my management decisions. It gave me a unique perspective in terms of, how I manage bands just as being a writer. When I continued to write into my mid-20s. I wrote for the San Francisco Examiner magazine and as well as San Francisco Examiner newspaper when it was still owned by Hearst, and as well as some other outlets. So I had these other perspectives a little bit, and I don't think, who knows, but a big part of my continued relationship with Death Cab before they hired me to manage them in 2003 was through Noise Pop. I met them in 1998 at North by Northwest and music festival, and we became friendly. It was right after their first record, Something About Airplanes, came out, and we became friendly. But the way that and then I booked their first two shows in San Francisco. One was opening for this band Crumb that I had managed at Bottom of the Hill, and then the next one was at Great American Music Hall during Noise Pop, and it was that bill was Grandaddy, Creeper Lagoon, Fiverr, Death Cab, and Rodriguez, which was M. Ward's old band. So,
wow.
So that continued my friendship with them, and when they hired me in 2003, I was an experienced indie rock manager. I'd never been able to get out of that world. I managed some very critically adored artists like Beulah and Creeper Lagoon and a band called The Pattern that did really well in the UK. It was on the cover NME, but none of them sold any records. And it was my relationship, because of who they are, that they knew me, that they gave me a shot as their manager. And that certainly, started the second phase, or more aptly, the successful phase of my career, So it's been, Noise Pop's been, huge for me in that regard.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that connection point from that perspective, but I could see where that would, usher in a new phase.
Yeah, and it was never if I book Death Cab and Noise Pop, they'll hire me to manage them someday. They were self-managed for the first 5 years. It never crossed my mind. It was more of, if I, it just worked out that they played the festival a bunch, and we developed a friendship, and when they'd come through town on their own, we'd hang out, etc. So there was a level of trust. Yeah.
And as I recall, I think from the first couple of records in the beginning of their career, touring was really the catalyst for the most part.
Yeah, well, you think back to, that era, right before, iTunes Store launched and Pitchfork Effect really, in the OC and Garden State, it, was touring and alternative weekly newspapers and college radio. That's how you sold records as an indie rock band. Some obviously broke through to the next level, but it was very rare. Thinking back to Modest Mouse, Lonesome Crowded West, which was such a successful record. That was, sold like 50,000 copies. It wasn't until the aughts and the distribution mechanism changing, as far as Amazon and iTunes, that, and also the internet informing people, right, where you could actually learn about a band like the Shins or Death Cab or Arcade Fire, and you can read about them and then go click over to another page and buy it or listen to it. Back in the old days, you would hear, you might hear a song on college radio, and then you go to the record store and they're sold out of the 2 copies that they ordered, and you wait a week for it to come back in and you go pick it up. Or you have a friend who calls you from Chicago and says, I just saw this awesome band at the Empty Bottle, and they're coming to San Francisco and they're playing Bottom of the Hill. You should go check them out. Like, that's in, maybe there's a preview in the SF Weekly. So, that it was a much different thing from, Seth Cohen, a character on the OC, talking about Death Cab for Cutie or Bright Eyes, and then being able to go on the internet and look up that band and buy their record. That changed everything.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting when you think about it in context of what we're experiencing now over the last year, because to kind of bring that thought back around, touring for artists and weeklies and whatnot you mentioned were so important, but a lot of that has been stripped apart over the last year with the pandemic, and but you still have the internet. You have the ability to connect in different ways online. I'd be curious to know. Obviously Ben's been doing and just had his first I guess 1 year anniversary of
Yeah.
doing his first live stream. But I think, across the board, a lot of your clients seem to embrace the realities of, okay, I'm at home for a while. What do I do? How can I engage with fans, and how can I try new things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, some opted in and some didn't. But I think that's natural when you manage artists, right? When you have a diverse roster of people, what they're going to want to do and what their comfort level is. Ben's, live streaming really just grew out of a place of him, wanting, in these early days of COVID, I think he started a few days after the world shut down, was just to give something for people, his fans to look forward to and something to tune into during that, because I think it's easy to forget like how chaotic and scary that period was. Like we didn't know what was going on. And then, over time, other clients, did things. Also in the early days, Bethany had tried to do this kind of sort of advice line called Bethline, where people, fans would call in and ask questions. It was almost like a love line type thing. And, Soccer Mommy had done a streaming performance as part of a Club Penguin where people watch as you create a penguin avatar and you watch it. And so many people signed up that the server crashed the first time. So that show had to be rescheduled a second time.
Oh, wow.
So we just tried to adapt, and obviously back then no one had any idea how long this would be going on. And Ben had his 1 year anniversary on March 17th. He did a 1 year anniversary show. Hopefully there's not a 2 year anniversary show.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like there will be, but, it's really, I think for Ben, I could speak to Ben in particular, it was really cathartic for him too. It gave him something to look forward to during that period. Obviously it was for his fans, and he ended up raising over, a couple $100,000 for nonprofits through the donate button on his streaming page. But it was also cathartic for him to have something to look forward to.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, when you can find ways to do good in challenging times and find new ways to connect, then maybe, to your point, it's not for every artist, and finding your voice within that can be challenging. But there's a lot of this like experimentation and trust put into, well, will this work? Does it feel right for me? And does it resonate with an audience? And what good can I do that comes out of that, I think, is a place that I think a lot of artists wouldn't have found themselves in naturally without having that, that button pushed to pause and having to rethink things quite a bit. I will say I've been impressed with, I guess I have mixed emotions because just as being a music fan and aware of the trajectory Soccer Mommy was on, and the fact that record came out before, weeks before, if I recall.
February, we had 2 records come out. We had Best Coast February 21st and Soccer Mommy February 28th. They weren't declined at the time, but they are now. Real Estate also had a record come out at the end of February. So,
oh wow,
3 of our clients, Best Coast was in Detroit the day that, the world shut down, literally at soundcheck. Yeah. We've been debating for 2 days whether to play the show, whatever. And the plan at that point was to play the show in Detroit and then go home. But then it all catalyzed, and so
yeah. Oh man, that's so rough. I will say though, I think with the Soccer Mommy record, I think it still felt like that was a comforting record for me for a large part of last year as a fan, but it also felt like it found an audience, in spite of, not having the ability to kind of like be out on the road and promote it, I think, and probably, I would imagine, the intention around it, which is encouraging to see.
Yeah, I think, I was having this conversation with someone earlier today, and in a lot of ways, being, a band at Soccer Mommy's point in their career, young, really, second proper record, and having so much momentum, she'll be okay. It sucks that she lost so much income and that period of growth, but that momentum remains. I think, she'll be able to go out and tour whenever the world opens up and people are going to want to see her. I think it's more challenging for a band like, that's been around for a little while, band that's been around for 12 years, like a Best Coast or Real Estate, to go out and recapture that momentum of a new album. They always have their core fan base they can play to, but you count on the momentum of a new record to bring more people to venues. So I think that's, it's going to be very interesting when touring opens up, which it feels like it's opening up this year. And it feels like there will be a lot of touring next year, as in every band in the world on tour next year. But
right.
How it's all going to work out with that volume of touring and, if any venue capacity restrictions exist, security expense increases, it's hard to tell what's going to be happening. But yeah, you have to kind of figure out, how to bring momentum back to an artist after that. And so much time and energy and effort goes into setting up a record, and to have it all, for us, it's a bummer, but for our clients who just had the rug pulled out from under them, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the record came out, is just really, really frustrating, for everyone involved.
Yeah, I guess the only solace is the fact that it's a shared experience that everyone goes through. So, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, hopefully there's a reset on some level.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I think there is. And I think it'll return to a degree of normalcy at some point. I don't see for me as a, manager and business owner, I don't see my business being back to normal next year. I think 2023 at the earliest is when it starts to feel normal again. I think we'll have a lot of artists, a lot of our clients touring next year and working, but, there's just gonna be a lot of competition out there, to sell tickets. You're gonna have to also deal with, what's the public's appetite for gathering in small spaces with poor ventilation after a pandemic.
Right.
So there's just a lot of unknowns. I think for the consumer, it'll probably be really good next year. You're going to see packages, a lot of cool package tours. Every band you want to see is me touring. You're going to have the pick of the litter, so to speak, and how you want to spend your money on live music. But for artists, it's going to be a lot more challenging.
Yeah, I think all that's very true, but I do think, I guess maybe trying to look at it optimistically and maybe more from a fan perspective, I think there's going to be a large thirst for experiencing that again, and I think, music's always really driven around the emotion and connection that you make. So the time that you spend, I guess now trying to do what you can authentically to continue to have that connection and foster it, hopefully once you're able to, get back to quote unquote business as usual and be on the road, hopefully that wins out. I thought it was really interesting that Dinosaur Jr. came out so early on and announced dates, and part of me was like, wow, that's pretty brash, but another part of me is like, if that's one of potentially 5 shows that week in Minneapolis and I'm trying to figure out I want to go to, I would like to have that experience, and I'll probably grab that ticket ahead of anything else that comes up because of it,
Yeah, and look, the honest, part of this too is, like, the Dinosaur Jr. fan, they're going to be more challenged, right? Because their fans are not young. It's the artists who have a younger fan base. People are going to be fans are going to be more carefree about it, less concerned. As a 49-year-old man, which I will be in a couple months, like, how will I feel going to First Ave to see Dinosaur Jr. versus going to an outdoor show? I think that's, that part of it's going to be, that part of it'll be a little bit of a challenge. So, a lot remains to be seen. I'm a hell of a lot more optimistic now, March 23rd than I was 6 weeks ago. It feels like the world's moving in the right direction at this point. So.
Yeah, I think you're right in that sense. I definitely, and everyone I speak to and personally, I feel like it's amazing almost how much, not to get too political, although it would be nice to touch on some of the work you've done in the past there too. So I think it's fair game. I mean, how much it just feels like it's changed since Inauguration Day to now. Yes. And that's only been really a couple of months. Like the collective mood, certainly within the industry, certainly amongst artist communities, and I would say fans, keeping it specific to the industry, it does feel really promising, compared to what it was, last summer or last fall in the midst of it, which is something to be said for that. Maybe the acceleration is quicker, than we anticipate, due to maybe cooler heads being at the helm. One would hope.
Absolutely. And figuring out the distribution mechanism of the vaccine. I think that, it's funny. I don't know if funny is the word, but over the weekend I started reading the new issue of the New Yorker, and there's an article about, will the Attorney General of New York, bring charges against Trump? And I started reading it, and I'm just like, it's too soon. I just can't think about Donald Trump like this. It's still PTSD,
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of reasons for optimism. We're not out of the woods, that's for sure. We don't know what these variants are going to do. We don't know. There's a lot of unknowns, and I've already had my first shot, so I'm obviously open to being vaccinated.
Yeah, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. But it's I'm not like given a choice. I wouldn't particularly want to be beta testing a vaccine, which is what we're all doing.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah, very true.
I wish that we had the luxury of waiting for round 2, but we don't. We all have to just take a leap of faith that this is the right thing. There are a lot of things we're doing in this world right now that we don't know the effects. We don't know what holding a cell phone next to our ear, our brain, hours a day is doing for in terms of brain cancer either. We're not going to know for a while. So you just kind of have to take a leap of faith.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. I think it's a really interesting time frame when you think of just how quickly everything's accelerating out of necessity. And the shifts culturally, socially, and honestly, even emotionally that we have to go through as individuals and how we engage with life in general, but certainly even art, is really fascinating. Like, obviously we've all, like, film had to make a drastic shift. The fact that you can watch pretty much every film that's nominated for an Oscar this year at home and certainly binge watching, as a form has been really nice, and video calling and live streaming shows. Like, I don't think I bought my first live stream show at the beginning of this year, and it seems like there was a shift where I think everyone kind of got to the point where it's like, oh, it's the dead of winter. I haven't seen live music, and I love this artist, and I want to be supportive, and I'm willing to spend the same amount of money I'd spend on a ticket to go see a show. It does feel like we're adapting and evolving as a culture in hopefully healthier ways, and I'm really curious to see what sticks, long term. I mean, one of the things that I really appreciated, and I guess it would have been right at a year ago on St. Patrick's Day, but Bono put out a new song that he just kind of sang into his iPhone at a piano for St. Patrick's Day last year. And the intimacy and rawness of that was striking to me. Like, regardless of how you feel about the song or U2 or whatever, it's like an artist at that level being that willing to be exposed in that manner on a whim and sharing something newly created in that manner. I was like, I hope we bottle that up and continue to use that energy moving forward in a way that we wouldn't have pre-COVID, pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of things were, the fast forward button was hit on. I mean, live streaming is certainly one of those things. It's not going to replace touring. It's an ancillary form of revenue and an ancillary form of way of connecting with fans. But obviously that had been a medium for a long time. It just got a lot more exposure, and now we're kind of seeing, we're going to see kind of live streaming 3.0, which is, new companies that are being formed that are, more interactive, more socially focused, et cetera, coming out. Because, when live streaming, at least, my view of what happened is, these platforms that had existed, now we're getting a lot of attention, and there was speed to market to try to land artists to use specific platforms. Right. It wasn't so much about improving that platform, So now what we're seeing is improvements on certain platforms. There's been some acquisitions, but also you're seeing new platforms rolling out that, make it easier to feel like you're watching it with a friend, or make it easier to feel like, or make it more participatory, etc. So it'll be interesting to see where that becomes. I just don't, to me, of course, if you're a global superstar like Billie Eilish, you're going to make a ton of money on a live stream. It's not going to replace touring, though, because you're going to make a ton of money. You're going to make more money touring. And I think for us, what we've kind of seen, and not all of our artists have done paid live streams, but the ones we have, it's kind of in line with, you make about what you would on headlining a major market, right? So kind of say, I go to New York and I sell out Terminal 5, I'm going to live stream it, and I'm going to make about the same amount I'm going to live stream to the world and make about the same amount of money. So, and you do that once. You can't do that every day or every week. So, which, that's nice income, and obviously you don't have the same expenses that you would have, but, I just don't think, I think, that's kind of where I see it financially now. And there certainly is fatigue on live streams. And we also know that most of the live streams aren't actually live anymore. Most of them are pre-recorded.
That's true.
Right. So it's different energy to it. So, but yeah, I think that is something that, it certainly is now on a faster track to being the norm than it was 13 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I found myself early in the pandemic watching fan shot videos from the crowd, where in the past I'd be like, I don't want to see the back of somebody's head. Now I'm like, that's all I want to see is hands in the air and the back of somebody's head. It's just like the emotional and kind of psychological shift of that is kind of fascinating to think about in a way. But I think there's a lot to be learned from this period.
It'd be funny if one of the new live streaming services, they incorporate like, you can be stuck standing behind a 6'8" person at a show,
My wife would love that.
Yes, but I'm 6'2", so I've always been, I've been always okay at shows, but
relegated to the back a little bit.
Yes,
I get it.
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny. It's those small things that I think you don't think about, like pre-pandemic, and all of a sudden now as a fan, you're like, oh, that experience actually wasn't so bad. Getting a beer spilled on me at a show, that's okay.
I'm live streaming something. I asked my son to walk by, my 13-year-old son to walk by with a red cup and spill beer on my feet, just so I could feel more like I'm in a venue.
Whatever it takes. No, we'll definitely get back to all that at some point. But trying to find the silver linings in all this, though, I think is a fun exercise for this season for sure. I did want to make sure to touch on both your history with political initiatives, going all the way back to Vote for Change, and also, I guess, probably the realities of the pandemic probably opening up a little bit more of a lane to focus on that last year. As I, you and I didn't talk directly about this, but I know you were in touch with my partner, Kyle Fournette, around the 46 for 46, Pledge 46 campaign we were doing last year. And it was a big switch, and it seemed like it was a slow start for the industry, even going into the beginning of next year. But then it was like a radical kind of like reconfiguration of how do you do this when you can't do shows. But I love the fact that the industry did rally once there was a presumptive nominee in Biden, and moving it in a direction that I think had a large and profound impact. Maybe, and I kind of argued this a little bit, not argued, but kind of discussed this a little bit with Kyle with our own initiatives. Like, I think we had more of an impact this way. It wasn't as fun. Like, we didn't get experience the thrill of being at a show and seeing, artists discussing these issues. But because, honestly, that didn't really exist in the manner that we were trying to do, except for, I think, Vote for Change back in 2004, which was pre-social media for the most part. So I still think that whole experience needs to be tested, outside of the pandemic. But kudos for rallying and doing all the things that you guys were able to touch on and do last year, because I think that's so needed, and it was a bright spot in an otherwise tough year.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were able to to dedicate more time than they normally would have been able to. And, to further your point about, not having the live events, which was a bummer, especially, when you're talking about how to try to motivating people to turn out the vote. But, the flip side was more people were able to get involved and, both directly with the campaign and, outside of it with their own efforts. And when I got in touch with Michelle Kwan, who was the only person working with surrogates for the Biden campaign, this is, probably April. So he was the presumptive nominee. They were still trying to find their footing in terms of how to run a campaign virtually. And, I tried to connect Michelle with people within the industry, and, pretty shortly thereafter, Nick Stern, who's a fellow manager and a good friend, he and I had worked closely together on Hillary's campaign, doing work for Hillary's campaign. He and I just started doing artist outreach, manager outreach, I should say, connecting managers and agents with Michelle in the Biden campaign. There was a lot of resistance from, some people were immediately in. There were a lot of artists or managers saying, look, my artist is going to support, is anti-Trump, and there's going to support getting out the vote, but they're not going to publicly endorse Biden. Biden, is not Bernie or Elizabeth Warren or Obama. He's not the cult of personality. He wasn't, he's seen as a very safe choice. But as things moved towards the election, which I thought would be the case, as you said, been doing stuff around elections through 2004, as the stakes become clear, as you get closer to election day, more people, figure out a way to get involved, and that's what happened. So, I think for me, I'm always going to try to use my position in the world, which basically knowing people who have a much bigger platform than I'll ever have, to try to get them involved with elections. I think for a lot of artists, a lot of managers, they're not really clear on how to get in, right? The barrier for entry seemed to be very high when it's not. And I think it took the pandemic for people to realize there's a lot of different ways to support a candidate or to support an election, right? And that was another, that was a silver lining, right?
I think it's important, and I think, the reason Kyle and I got into this, or at least I can speak for myself, is I want to see that work continue. I guess to kind of go back to an overarching theme of the conversation, like, I think it's a learning experience for managers and artists to, be limited in how they get engaged, taking concerts off the table last year, but seeing the impact that can be made in other ways. I certainly hope, and the work is ongoing, as you've obviously experienced every 4 years around a presidential election. But, I would argue that's the other side effect of the pandemic, is that I think most people have realized the importance of their state and local government, and maybe the need to engage there too. So I really hope that that's a healthy byproduct for artists and managers to at least be a little more in tune and maybe a little more on their toes in the future, when it comes to just speaking their mind and taking advantage of that platform to hopefully move whatever agenda that they feel is most needed forward. I think that's super important.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think, I know we've been talking a lot of silver linings, so far, but, one of the silver linings of Trump being elected was, I think, a generation of people understanding their vote matters and the importance of being politically engaged. And, I will be the first to admit that I have not been nearly as engaged since Biden was sworn in. I'm still paying attention. I think, we all have a little bit of PTSD. We all need a little bit of a breather, but, it's still going to be important that we hold, Biden and his administration's feet to the fire on the issues. And it's going to be important that we lay the groundwork for continuing to make an impact in the direction this country goes in, and I think, you're absolutely correct about local politics. And God, I mean, winning both seats in Georgia, we're already seeing the importance of that effort. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there were a number of positive things to come out of this. To come out of the political engagement of the last year.
Yeah. And hopefully that all that good work continues in whatever form that it takes.
Yeah. I think it will. You're talking about, I mean, there's also, the other lane, of course, is just activism in general, right? Like
yes, that's true.
Political work, but just general activism and raising money for social causes, whether it's, even right now, what we're seeing over the last week, just as far as anti-Asian violence, just people are we now know how to have a better idea how to rally people and to engage people and to bring attention towards a platform, raise money for causes, etc. That stuff's now been requested.
Yeah, all that stuff's super important for sure. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for touching on all these points.
Yeah, no problem. I think, going back to the Vote for Change tour, which people might not know what that was because it was a long time ago at this point, as much as I want to think it wasn't a long time ago. The Vote for Change tour happened in 2004, and it was a historic, gathering of managers and artists and organizing a tour that hit various swing states in October of 2004, right before the presidential election, in hopes of getting John Kerry elected. It was not a giant festival tour. There were different headliners that went out with one or two support acts, but you would just take over a state basically. So you would get, Pearl Jam, let's say, playing in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania with Death Cab opening. You would get Bruce Springsteen playing in Philadelphia with, Bright Eyes opening. You would get Dixie Chicks playing in another, Allentown, Pennsylvania, just with another artist opening. So it was these huge artists came together, some, including Bruce Springsteen, for the first time supporting a political candidate. And it took a lot of coordination between, high-level managers. I mean, Dave Matthews was involved in it. John Mellencamp was involved in it. Neil Young popped into a couple shows. It was just... and, it made an impact, not enough of an impact to get John Kerry elected, but it was a really, really amazing tour. And that, as well as a project I was working on with an author named Dave Eggers and some other folks in the music industry, Josh Rosenfeld, who is now a partner of mine at Brilliant Corners, but, runs Barsook Records, and Amy Spisak, who at the time was working for Interscope, is now a manager, working with some great artists. And, we all put together a book and a CD called The Future Dictionary for America and The Future Soundtrack for America, and raised money for progressive causes around the election. Those were really my first forays into politics, working around politics. And I don't want to say that's where I got the political bug. It's more of, that's when I realized that I'm in a position, because of my relationships, that I could help make an impact in a positive societal impact. I guess it's positive societal impact if you're a Democrat, but from my viewpoint, positive societal impact. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When it comes to other issues outside of politics, that's usually where it falls. But yeah, very true.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it made an impact on me. I mean, those Vote for Change shows, I flew to Cleveland to see the Springsteen REM Bright Eyes show. And and John Fogerty came out, and it was, it was fantastic. Kind of community. Yeah. Aimed around that, which I think set the stage, hopefully, for that to continue.
Yeah, I remember we, before that tour, when we were getting ready to, so that tour grew out of Aaron Potts, who co-founded Milarepa with Adam Yauch of the Beastie Boys. They did the Tibetan Freedom Concerts. Aaron is a good friend, and Aaron organized, along with Nicole Vandenberg, who used to do PR and fun and kind of the political and activism stuff for Pearl Jam. They organized a meeting in New York a bunch of managers to talk about the 2004 election. This was in the late spring of 2004. And the concept of this tour grew out of that meeting. And at the beginning of August, when we were getting ready to announce the tour, they invited all the artists to come to New York and have basically a day-long meeting at the Soho Grand to talk about, we kind of had PR coaching and to talk about the strategy. And it said, we had, Rolling Stone came and did that. I don't know if you remember the cover story for Rolling Stone.
I do.
So when I think of who was on that tour, because I don't remember that well, I think of that. I kind of go through the people who are on the cover of the magazine. And Ben from Death Cab was on the cover. It was, because he was there with all these, very, prominent figures in music. But it was really incredible couple days in New York. And one of the things that really stands out, at one point, all the artists were sitting in a circle in the room, and Bruce Springsteen and Stephen Van Sant were sitting on kind of opposite sides of the circle. But they started talking to each other and to the group about how this was the first time they'd ever politically endorsed a candidate. And that's just such an incredible, it was such an incredible thing to see, to be a part of that.
Yeah. I mean, those are rare moments. I remember that photo vividly. And I also remember, because we're of the same age and era, I remember Amnesty International's tours as well, and the impact that had, seeing many of those same artists, and Springsteen obviously was involved in one of the tours, but just seeing that and hearing about that as a kid in school and, absorbing what that was, I thought was, we need more of that in the world.
I think it'll be there. I think it'll be there.
Yeah.
I think, organizations like that you and Kyle founded are so important, to keep it going and to keep people connected. I want to continue obviously doing political work on a national level, but I'm now kind of focusing locally on San Francisco and trying to help make sure that as we come out of the pandemic, that the arts community is taken care of, or I shouldn't even say thought of, right?
Right.
There's an opportunity right now with major cities because rents have gone down and people have moved out to be more proactive around supporting the arts communities, because cities like San Francisco and Manhattan, the art communities they've been decimated over the last 10 years or longer. Anyway, that's a tangent, nothing to do with management. I was going to say, the one thing that needs to be said about my political engagement and political work, the reason that I'm able to do this is because the Death Cab guys, who I've been working with now for almost 18 years, they are engaged, and that's how I became engaged. And it is through their work, and their initiatives that I learned how to do it, or I learned, or I've been able to piggyback on it, I should say. And the fact that they're still incredibly engaged and they're incredibly supportive of me doing this work too. So, it's not, it's a real, I feel very fortunate to have their support in doing these things.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's definitely a team effort. It's one that I think managers can be more engaged with in educating artists, but ultimately, it's always going to be artist driven.
Yep.
Yeah, first and foremost. I'd be remiss. I want to be mindful of the time, and I have a kind of like a lightning round of questions I'll hit you with in a moment. But we have to talk about Thelonious Monk for a hot minute because we follow each other on social media, and I know your love of Monk runs deep, as it does for me. So, how did being an indie rock guy? What's your history in a nutshell with Monk and with jazz and your love for jazz? Because it's kind of I don't know if it's unique, but it's not as readily displayed, I guess, as one would hope. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking of America, thinking of an art form, and being supportive in a way. Just love seeing that.
So I started listening to jazz in college, and the reason I started listening to jazz was because when I was studying, I wanted to listen to music, but I found lyrics distracting, and So I started listening to some jazz records. And then I started getting kind of into the mythology of jazz a little bit. I saw a photo that William Claxton took. I didn't know who William Claxton was at the time, and I didn't know who Donald Byrd was at the time. But Donald Byrd on the A train in New York playing his trumpet. And it was just told such a beautiful story. And it was such a literally and figuratively, such a wonderful snapshot of a period of time in America.
Right.
When I moved to New York the summer before my senior year to intern for Roger Kramer and Jim Grant at Sirius Link, Roger was a big jazz fan, and we talked about it a lot. He encouraged me to really learn about the history and the stories, et cetera, and turned me on to some records. As far as Monk is concerned, I don't remember exactly how I discovered Monk other than just learning about jazz, but when I moved to San Francisco, one of the first, if not the first records, well, it was a CD at this point, that I bought was Thelonious Alone in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Which coincidentally also the cover photo was shot by William Claxton.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But I didn't even make that. It didn't matter. It's him, but so then I just started getting into Monk, and, he is, along with, Bill Evans and John Coltrane and, my favorite, jazz artists of all time. I love Monk is such an incredible player and incredible, wrote incredible songs and compositions, but his personality, he's just such a personality. So we named our son Thelonious.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Wow. Yeah. I thought the only connection was the Brilliant Corners things, but wow, there's that too. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, Theo is his, we call him Theo, but his full name is Thelonious Jacob Kurland. I tried to go for Thelonious Spear Kurland, but my ex-wife was not going to let it take it that far.
Maybe a little,
it's a little too much. But yeah. And then Brilliant Corners, when we were merging the company with, back in, the end of 2017, was it with Lover and Beam and Josh Rosenfeld, we were trying to come up with names, and we all felt like we already had good names, right? Lover and Beam.
Yeah, you did.
But we needed a fresh start, and I started looking through my record collection, and I just sent off a bunch of potential names, and Brilliant Corners stuck. So
that's awesome.
That's how we got there. But I still love Monk, and it's I listen to him. I wouldn't say every day, but almost every day I listen to at least a Thelonious Monk record.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I know we're running out of time.
No, it's okay. Yeah, we can talk about this really quick. I mean, I'd be remiss if we didn't. I think I got exposed to Monk in the same kind of way. I was in high school.
Yeah.
And a bunch of friends of mine were really into jazz, played in a jazz band. And I think it was the Clint Eastwood documentary, Straight No Chaser, which really kind of like seeing that his personality and playing. But I remember being in college and having to go to the library to listen to the complete Riverside recordings because I couldn't check it out, but I could listen to it. And I spent hours in the library listening to it. And I think it's all streaming now, but there's like a 20-minute version of him workshopping around midnight that is just fascinating to kind of just hear where he's, trying to imagine what he's trying to do and accomplish with this version he's trying to work through is really, really fascinating. And then I took a jazz appreciation class or a theory class. It might as well have been appreciation. My history as a drummer, and I can't really analyze a jazz solo from a theory level. But I remember seeing videos of him playing, and he'd get up and kind of dance instead of comp.
Yeah,
and if you really... Yeah, he had this really unique thing, and it's almost like, crazy to watch. But I had this epiphany where I'm like, oh my gosh, the way he's dancing, the jerky moves he has is how he plays and comps behind a soloist. He's getting up and you don't hear it. You can only visually see it, but he's still comping and still playing piano in his head while he's dancing. And I just was really struck by that. It's like, it just endeared me to him in a way that, it is kind of complete in a sense that you don't get necessarily from other artists in any kind of art form. I don't know. He's just like the complete picture. to me.
Yeah, no, exactly, for sure. I mean, I agree with that. Everything you're saying. He's such a fascinating, songwriter, player, and human being. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah, that film Straight No Chaser is such a great jazz documentary. I recommend it to people all the time.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. It's a good entry point to definitely one of the giants for sure. And it's nice. It's nice to have that outlet. I mean, because we can't listen to everything that we work on or work in all the time. So it's nice to take a hard pivot towards something that's more our own. I would say.
Yep. Exactly. I'd love to. I'd love to be involved with some jazz artists, but it's hard to make money.
It is from a business perspective. Absolutely.
And it's not all about making money, but time. There's an equation that happens about time.
Right.
Busy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And maybe someday there'll be a season for that. You never know.
Yeah. Yep.
So, well, thanks so much, Jordan, for taking the time to chat and for reaching out. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been so great. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. I'm ready for your. I'm ready for your rapid fire questions. I'm a little nervous, but
Do you have time still? I'm sorry.
I
don't want to hold you. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure.
I have a few minutes for sure.
Cool. Well, this is always fun, and we can definitely, keep them on the short side if it's helpful. But the idea is just to kind of get a little more insight. So, what's the first album you ever bought? Like one that had a meaning for you?
Well, okay, so. God, I could go a lot of directions with this, but I mean, I was a huge Kiss fan at age 6. I owned every Kiss record. So,
okay, wow.
So that might be one way to go. But the first record that I bought that kind of put me, I think, more further along in life that sent me down this path that I'm on was The Who It's Hard in 1982, which, was their last studio record before the Endless Wire, which they put out sometime in the 2000s. But that was really where I became a nut around the Who and music and etc. So
no, it's usually those kind of records definitely have a tendency to kind of stand out. There usually is one artist or record that kind of is that pivot point, for sure. What was the first concert you went to?
Well, the first concert I ever saw was Sean Cassidy with my sister and my parents. That was probably 6 or 7. But the first concert that I went to on my own was the Beastie Boys Licensed Still Tour at the Aragon Ballroom with the Beastie Boys, Fishbone, and Murphy's Law.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
87. I was 14, almost 15.
Wow. I can't... Just seeing photos from that era, I just can't imagine what that experience would have been like. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that was, they were, that was Fight for Your Right to Party, getting drunk on stage, women dancing in cages. It was not the most PC tour, but it was. Yeah.
Still, though, in hindsight, it's nice to see.
Yeah.
What was the last show you caught before the pandemic?
It was during Noise Pop Best Coast headlining the Regency Ballroom. That was the last show. It was the last Saturday in February.
Yeah, that's a good one to go out on, though.
Yeah, that week I saw a bunch of shows because it was Noise Pop, and also I had gone up to Seattle to see Death Cab. They did 3 nights at the Showbox, and I went to the first 2 nights of that too. So, yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we can revisit the next show. Yeah, it's definitely nice to have those moments for sure.
I did see a show during the pandemic. I did go see. I did go to a couple drive-in shows actually. So.
Oh yeah. Oh cool.
I did in Burlingame. Yeah. So I would not. They kind of count, but yeah, there was a weekend of drive-in shows. I saw Thundercat. And I stopped by Pink Martini too, just to kind of get that. So I have, yeah.
Yeah, those count, but during pandemic times, nonetheless.
Yeah.
What's a recent music discovery that you found that kind of comes to mind? Not necessarily something you work with, but just something that you're just a fan of.
I've only heard one song, but this artist Papa Road I really love, or Papa Rod, sorry, really great song. Forgetting the name of it, but I could look at my phone. But it really, really great. I think during the pandemic, I've probably been listening to more ambient music than I ever have. So I've kind of done a slightly deep dive on Japanese ambient music. Light in the Attic put out a box set last year, which is
cool.
really great for that. But yeah, just being home a lot and, wanting to, again, like even when I work now, I listen to jazz mostly, but, lyrics, I love, when I'm driving or whatever, but when I'm working, trying to focus, it's better for me not to have lyrics on in the background. So that was a nice discovery. I'm trying to remember the name of that box set, but there was one record in particular called Wave Notation, which is a Japanese ambient record, which is really great.
Wow. Yeah, I'll have to dig into that. That's awesome. So one final question. So what do you enjoy most outside of, your work? Because, obviously, especially being a manager, but working in this industry, it feels like, there's a lot of play that goes into it typically. But what brings you joy outside of all that?
Being with my son, it's a total cliche, but, he's 13 now, so it's a much different relationship than it was 3-4 years ago, but we're very close and I love spending time with him. I love reading. That's been one of the favorite things about the pandemic, is I've been reading so much, because a lot of mornings I get up, I don't have to be anywhere. Right. So now Theo's back in school. So, I have him half the time and, driving, but there's a lot of mornings where I just get up and I have I'll just spend an hour reading a book. That's great. And I'm a sports guy too, right? So I played basketball and baseball growing up, and I'm still, Giants season ticket holder and a Warriors season ticket holder. And I just yesterday was able to buy tickets to Giants games in April. They're doing limited seating.
Oh, great.
So, they're offering season ticket holders, I think, about 5 games for the month of April. So I'm pretty excited about that. Otherwise, I love movies, and I love San Francisco. I love, got into paddleboarding during the pandemic, which has been,
been
really fun. Yeah. So something I'd done a little of in the past, but it's been really nice, relaxing, zen
it
moment.
is, yeah.
Yeah. So that's,
yeah, being in the land of the lakes up here in Minnesota, we do a fair amount of paddleboarding and kayaking. It is really a nice thing. Yes. Well, I'll let you get to it, but thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I'll see you soon. I hope.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. See you, Jordan.
Bye-bye.
Bye. I want to thank Jordan again for taking the time to chat with us today and for sharing his various experiences and perspectives with us. As always, if you're so inclined, please rate us or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Tough Love Pod. That's TOUGHLOVEPOD. And above all, share this podcast with your friends and fellow music industry and artist communities. It takes a village. You can reach us at chris@toughlovepod.com. Be well, trip up, get back up, and let's all learn as we go. Until next time.